Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the North Central Region Water Network's second Speed Networking webinar. This webinar is one of a 7-part series designed primarily to connect university researchers and extension professionals with the great work that our colleagues are doing across the 12-state North Central region. And since this is the North Central Region Water Network, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We hope you will use the chat box freely and also use the 20-minute session at the end of our 4 presenters' time to ask them questions, even ask each other questions, and use this time really to connect to your colleagues across the North Central region. So our first webinar was on managing water supply, and today's topic is decision support tools for nutrient and sediment management. Our speakers will be Rick Cruse from Iowa State University, talking about Iowa's daily erosion project and potential expansion to other Midwestern states. Laura Ward-Good and Richard Halopka from the University of Wisconsin will be introducing us to Wisconsin's runoff advisory system. Chad Hart from Iowa State University, but representing decision support tools being developed by the multi-state USDA NIFA-funded UDU project. Again, will be talking to us about those UDU-developed decision support tools. And then finally, Jessica D'Ambrosio from the Ohio State University will be updating us on some decision support tools that she and her colleagues have developed for alternative agricultural ditch design. Again, the presenters will have 10 minutes each to introduce you to themselves and to their topics, and then we will have 20 minutes at the end for questions and discussion. So you can, questions that you have for the presenters, please enter those into the chat box. We will be recording those questions and we'll sort through them and help facilitate asking the presenters your questions. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Rick Cruse. Rick is a professor at the Department of Agronomy, the Department of Agronomy at Iowa State University and the director of the Iowa Water Center. He received his bachelor's degree from Iowa State University and his master's and PhDs from the University of Minnesota. Rick is a fellow of the American Society for Agronomy and the Soil Science Society of America and is currently the president-elect of the U.S. National Institute of Water Resources. He has authored or co-authored 90 refereed scientific papers, 28 non-refereed technical publications, and 12 book chapters. And he is co-leader of the Iowa Daily Erosion Project. So Rick, go ahead. Janice, I'm not hearing Rick.
Rick, we're not hearing you. Can I have you just turn off your mic and turn it back on again just to try to reactivate it, please? We did do a sound check and it was working okay. Please hold. Rebecca, I wonder if we want to shuffle our presentations a little bit and let Rick come on second so that he can, I can do a little troubleshooting with him offline.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing. Okay, we'll go ahead and advance to Laura and Richard's presentation. Okay. hopefully we'll get that resolved. And let's move on to Laura Ward-Good and Richard Halopka. So you can see their bios there. Laura is a scientist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Soil Science Department. And for the last decade, she has led the development and implementation of software for fertilizer and manure management planning and field runoff risk assessment in Wisconsin. And Richard Halopka is a Clark County educator with the University of Wisconsin Extension, and he provides research-based information to educate farmers and residents in Clark County, Wisconsin. Many of you are familiar with that position description, I'm sure, and also collaborates with state and regional teams. Richard's interest in crediting on-farm nutrients for profitable crop production, improving the sustainability of farms, along with improving soil and water quality in Clark County, Wisconsin. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin-River Falls in broad area agriculture, master's degree in agronomy from Iowa State, and is a certified crop advisor with over 17 years of work experience in agronomy. So the two, Laura and Richard, make a great team here, and why don't you go ahead and kick us off, Laura?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now what I am not, it worked. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to advance. This is the home page of Wisconsin's Manure Management Advisory System. It has links to map-based tools for aiding manure application planning on a day-to-day basis and for long-term and annual planning. I'm going to be talking about the Runoff Risk Advisory Forecast, which is a daily application planning tool that comes in two formats, a desktop version and a format for mobile devices. This is a screenshot of the desktop version. The Runoff Risk Advisory Forecast is intended to provide farmers with information on whether on a given day they should postpone spreading manure or take extra precautions because runoff risk is high. It's based on the National Weather Service's flood forecast model, and it shows the likelihood of runoff occurring from precipitation or snow melt in 216 basins in Wisconsin. The forecast of runoff is within the next 3 days for most of the year, and when the soil is frozen or snow covered, the forecast goes out for 10 days. This particular screenshot is from earlier this month when the state was transitioning from winter. Up here in the northern part of the state, you see that there are basins that are blue. That means that the soil is still frozen, but runoff risk is low. Where the basins are red, it means that runoff risk is high within that basin. And where you see these bars, that means that runoff risk from snowmelt is expected. In the rest of the state, the soil was not frozen, and you have clear basins. That means a low runoff risk. Orange, that means moderate, and red is, again, high. You can find this map, this website, by searching for Wisconsin runoff risk. And when you get there, you'll see links to additional information about the forecast and also guidance on if you need to spread on a high-risk day. If you click on any basin within the map, like here for instance, a box will pop up with the daily runoff and precipitation forecast for the next 5 days. And it gives a daily risk assessment so that farmers can look ahead. If today's a high risk, maybe the next couple of days will not be, and they can plan accordingly. This box here is what the mobile application format looks like, and it uses your location to give you the runoff risk for the basin that you're in. This project is truly a multi-agency collaboration. Our Department of Agriculture has provided funding and the mandate for the website, along with education and training and advertising. The National Weather Service provides forecast, which is updated 3 times a day, and Dustin Goring of the North Central River Flood Forecast Center did the bulk of the modeling work. The U.S. Geological Survey, through its monitoring data of field runoff from agricultural fields and Discovery and other farms in Wisconsin, and also small agricultural watersheds in Wisconsin, provided us the information that's been used to calibrate the model. And Rick Wayne here at the University of Wisconsin in the Soil Science Department is responsible for the display of the forecast and maintenance of the website. And I don't know if Kevin Erb is listening, but he deserves kudos for helping get this project going in the first place. So what's next? The National Weather Service, starting this summer, is going to be moving to a 4-kilometer squared grid for its forecast from the basins, and so the forecast will be at a much finer resolution in the future. And it's also looking to expand in Minnesota in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and also into Michigan and Ohio. The Michigan and Ohio forecast effort is being funded by a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant. And those of you in the states of Michigan and Ohio may be interested to know that there are not yet local partners for this effort, so you may want to look into joining with that. Now I'm going to turn this over to Richard, who can talk to you about how the maps and the manure advisory system is used.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so as we step into this, Laura kind of touched on how it was developed, and I'm going to just touch on a little bit how we use this information as we look at nutrient management planning, plus working with the custom manure haulers here in Wisconsin, and the CAFO dairies is another aspect of it that we've worked with. So basically, as a nutrient management, we tie this into some of the education there, just to allow them to see, you know, we give them maps or restriction maps on their farm, but what if they have land or, you know, some things they don't have maps on? We can access this information and show them some restriction areas, and that where this web page is just kind of a handy tool that they can use to generate some maps or get some information. It's very useful when we start working with, oh, I'm having fun here with my buttons. The training programs, I guess we brought this in last year to the Professional Nutrient Applicators Association of Wisconsin. Did a lot of training. The annual meeting, there was over 70 individuals trained on just some of the basic concepts of how to understand a restriction map, understand the frozen soils, and some of the, in addition to the advisory of when not to be hauling manure on those high potential runoff periods, but also what was very important, just listening to that group speak, was how some of them have used that information on that website and have delayed manure applications because of saturated soils or the potential for snow melt, that type of thing. So from the professional applicator standpoint, it's a very good tool for them to use. Most of these guys have, you know, internet access, that type of thing, and it's as easy as clicking on a few clicks and you can get the information. You can zoom right in. That's what I like about it. I brought it up here a few minutes before we started, And it's interesting, in Clark County today we had rainfall in one area that we are in a moderate situation where we could have a potential for runoff. So that's basically how we focus in on that level 1 training. The CAFO planning, it's good for these larger operations. We did this at the CAFO training where they came in and also had the opportunity to see how this works at those CAFO trainings. It was presented to them, and now they have that ability to go in and just understand, you know, if we got that potential for a runoff, if they got some packed manure needs to get out, or if they're, you know, on either side of that when they cannot spread manure in that winter period. Just a little demonstration. This is not live, I understand, but I just clicked on this a few minutes ago, kind of clicked on that Longwood area where you see the arrow pointing, and it's kind of interesting, Clark County, that's about the line right now where we have a moderate potential for runoff. So it's kind of interesting as we go forward that even in a county the size of Clark County, there's an exact split right in the middle of the county right now of where there's a moderate potential and no potential really for runoff. Another part of it is this is showing annual planning restriction maps. Again, basically you go onto the web page and you can click on Clark County, a township, and just zoom into an area, zoom into a farm, and you can have that opportunity to see, you know, where the restriction areas are on that farm. Just an example of what, you know, once we click in, what a page would look like. And that's basically where we've been using this. It's been a very, very useful tool. The interesting thing in Clark County, about 50% of our farmers do not have internet access, but they do like when you come to these trainings and show them how you can generate this stuff, and they have that opportunity to see the restriction maps, the spread restrictions, and that type of thing. So I don't know how we're doing on time, but
I think you're about at the end.
Well, I timed that pretty good then, because that is the last slide.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Richard. Okay, and we'll just a reminder for those that have just joined, we're going to hold questions until the end. We're going to move on to our next speaker. And for those of you, again, that are just joining, Rick Cruse had some sound difficulties, so we're holding his presentation until after Chad and Jessica. So Chad, we're going to move to you. Chad Hart is an extension economist and associate professor of economics at Iowa State. Chad is a native of southwest Missouri, growing up on a rural homestead near Stark City, Missouri. He received his PhD in economics and statistics in 1999 from Iowa State, and his work is concentrated on crop marketing, crop insurance, international trade agreements, and bioenergy policy. He is also a partner in Farm Risk, an Iowa firm that develops revenue insurance products. And boy, if you have a chance to hear Chad give a talk on crop insurance, he's the one to help you there. So Chad, thanks for joining us, and go ahead.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you today. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I guess Rebecca will tell me if not.
You're good.
Good, thank you. Well, my name is Chad Hart. I am with Iowa State University, but I'm mainly representing the U2U project today. Let's see if I can find my buttons here. The U2U project is known as Useful to Usable. It's a USDA grant-funded project. There are at least 9 universities involved. Purdue is the lead university, but University of Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State, Iowa State, Nebraska, South Dakota State, we're all participating here. And our grand target is to produce a series of tools to help corn producers deal with climate change and variability. And so rather than show you one tool, I'm going to run you through a series of tools. And the first thing I want to highlight to you is our website. It's agclimateforyou.org. This is where you can find basically all the tools I will talk about today. What I'm showing you here is our website. And the big thing I'd like you to look at here is what we call our decision dashboard. It's right there. It's where we're housing all our tools, but not only are we housing our tools there, what we have done is we have cataloged what has been provided by the 12-state region, all the extension agents out there, and trying to gather all those tools together in one area. Just to show you what the decision dashboard sort of looks like, here's a screenshot of that. What we've got here is our collection of what we call our U2U suite of tools. Right now it has 3 tools, which I'm going to outline for you today. Our AgClimate View, our corn growing degree day, and our probable field data tools, and that's where we'll also add others as time goes forward. But we've also cataloged other decision resources created at other universities. We catalog the agronomic and climatic reports that are being put out not only by USDA, but again by University Extension staff throughout our 12-state region. We have climate and weather maps from the region as well, along with we're working with the National Drought Mitigation Center to provide drought information as we look out there. And so we like to try to package, if you will, all the information that we can gather across the 12-state region to help crop producers deal with climate change and variability. As I mentioned, we have 3 basic tools right now that we have developed. The first one was called AgClimate View. And I look at this one as sort of a tool that helps provide information to producers as they begin to bring climate information into their agricultural decision making. It's a very simple tool. It basically plots temperature precipitation values back to 1980. It also tracks county crop yields and trends over that same period of time so that producers can begin to link what's going on in their local weather patterns to what they've seen in their crop production. We see this being utilized in tandem with other decision resources that they have, and it helps establish some, if you will, long-term correlations between climate trends and crop production over time. This tool basically starts with a map, and in this case it covers our 12-state region, and all the red dots that you see across this map represent different weather stations across our 12 states. A user can either use the map to click on the weather station they would like to see, or they can type in their zip code or county name, and it would zoom in the map for them so that they can find the information. Once you click on that weather station, what will pop up is a graph that shows the maximum and minimum in precipitation and temperature for that county over the past basically 35 years. Users can then take this data and manipulate it in several ways. The graph can be highlighted, expanded. If they want to look at a specific, say, 2-year period, they can. If you run your mouse over the graph, what it would do is, just like it shows in the middle there with this June 1993 example, it will highlight what is going on at that month that you're hovering the mouse over. And it also, at the bottom of the page, allows users to download all the data that they're seeing so that they can incorporate it into a spreadsheet or other decision tool as it would be useful to them. Not only do we have just the basic climate information, but again, we allow producers to go in and select, in this case, either corn or soybeans, look at their yields over time, place the climate variables over the top to begin to look at those correlations between the crop yields and the weather variables that they're seeing. Now, that just sort of sets the stage to me in getting some climate information into their decision making. Our other tools are moving more towards specific decisions. For example, our growing degree days tool, I would say, is really targeting at activity planning, especially the choice of corn hybrids and making seed purchases and thinking about how the crop may mature over the course of the year. The tool works basically very similar to our AgClimate View tool in that you start by picking your county out across the 12-state region again, and then once that county is chosen, the user will get a graph that looks like this. In this case, what's showing up in the graph along this, if you will, the gray shaded area here, shows the projections for growing degree days for corn over the course of the growing season. What we also include in this, as you look at these blue bars on the front end of the graph here, those show when the last freeze of the spring occurs over the past 30-some years. We also highlight on the back end, the blue bars there, when the first freeze occurs in the fall, so that the user can see whether those whether the freeze potential will impact their crop choice and their crop maturity as it goes through time. The graph also shows when potential silking occurs within the corn, the red lines here, and then when the corn might reach maturity. Those would be the black lines over here that indicate black layer. The user can stylize this graph by choosing when they want the growing degree days to start. For example, in this case here, April 1st. They can pick how long a corn maturity they have in their variety. In this case, we've chosen 108 days, but they can change that as well. We choose the freeze temperature and also choose a comparison year. A lot of farmers like to talk about analog years, and so we've given them a way to pick their comparison year so they can see how this year is comparing to some year in history and how that might impact their crop choice. Now, our third tool that we have out there is a probable field days spreadsheet-based tool, and it's basically based upon the data that USDA provides every week on days suitable for field work in certain states here throughout our 12-state region. This helps quantify short-term weather risk, but also evaluates the potential to complete field work with current equipment in a timely manner. And the way the tool basically works is this, is that a spreadsheet opens up, and in this case this was done with combination with the folks down at the University of Missouri, the FAPRI group there, and with Ray Massey, who's an extension economist down there. And it basically allows producers to pick a state and a region within the state that they're going to be working in, what type of implement they're looking to be using over the next couple of weeks, get some details on that implement, how many acres they're trying to cover, and then some idea of how much time they have over the course of the week to actually do the field work. Then, based upon historical information on field days combined with historical weather information, we're able to calculate the probability of completing, in this case, the planting work over the course of the next week or so. What this graph basically shows is that 100% of the time you're about to cover 100 to 200 acres. As we look out to try to getting around 800 acres, the probability drops down to about 30% probability that can be done. And as I looked here for about 1,000, that's when you're probably not going to get there. So this tool helps frame what is possible to get field work done over a certain period of time. Not only do we have these three tools, but I think especially for this group, as we talk about nutrient management, one of the tools that we're really working on right now is an in-season nitrogen application tool that would look very similar to that field day tool that I just went through. But it would allow producers to evaluate the potential for in-season fertilizer application, not only based upon weather conditions at the time, but we're also looking to incorporate the 1- and 2-week forecasts that are available from the National Weather Service. We're also building a climate patterns tool to help show the monthly impacts of what's known as the ENSO cycle, or what most people know as El Nino or La Nina, but also we're looking at the Arctic Oscillation Index by regions across the 12-state region we have here to look at how those large climatic patterns influence weather events here in the upper Midwest, and especially thinking along the lines of what we've been hearing this spring and summer, that we're under an El Nino watch now. Well, what does that mean for us in terms of monthly average precipitation and temperature as we move through the growing season, and how might that influence producer decisions over time? And so this gives you a very quick feel, hopefully, of what the U2U project is trying to do and the types of tools that we are creating. Again, I'll put in a plug for our website, agclimateforyou.org. I hope that you have some time to go explore not only the website, but the tools that we've got there to see how they can fit within your programming efforts over the course of the coming years. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rebecca.
Excellent, Chad. Thank you so much. And again, we'll have time to ask Chad questions at the end, so please, for Chad or any of our speakers, feel free to start typing those questions into the chat box, and we'll record those and use those to ask the presenters at the end. Okay, Jessica D'Ambrosio is Program Manager for the Ohio Non-Point Source Education for Municipal Officials program, fondly known as NEMO. It's an outreach education program of the Ohio State University. In addition to her research on the concept of alternative designs for agricultural drainage channels and the geomorphology and ecology of stream systems, she has managed grant-funded and education and outreach projects for over 10 years. Jessica has a bachelor's degree in wildlife and fishery science from Penn State University and a master's degree in environmental sciences and PhD in soil and water engineering from the Ohio State University. Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to present a tool. We're going to jump out of the field for a second and jump into the drainage ditch. And I'm going to present a tool that we've developed here at the Ohio State University in conjunction with our partners at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, with some support funding from both, the former Great Lakes Regional Water Program in part and the USDA Conservation Innovation Grant. And this is a spreadsheet design tool for alternative channel design. And what I mean when I talk about that is, hold on, let me see if I can find my buttons. I cannot find my buttons.
Jessica, there are the arrow buttons just above your slide, slightly to the right of center.
Yes, I'm not seeing any arrow buttons. Do I need to be a moderator?
Okay, I will advance for you.
Okay, great. So the specific designs that we're talking about are an alternative to the conventional trapezoidal drainage ditch design, and that would be a two-stage ditch design where we simply create benches at the channel forming discharge. We don't touch the inset channel. Advance. A self-forming channel design where we excavate an entire width and then we let the system self-organize over a period of time. Advance. And then also what we call a natural channel design or channel relocation project, which is where we would construct both the floodplains and the inset channel and features within that channel, such as riffles and pools. Advance. So the Enhanced Ditch Design Spreadsheet is a simple Microsoft Excel-based spreadsheet tool that's freely available. It consists of a series of worksheets. Some are visible to the user and some are not. They're doing all the work in the background. The first page or the first worksheet is a set of instructions. We also have a detailed user manual available to help you work through the spreadsheet. Advance. The second worksheet is called the Watershed worksheet, and here's where you put in information about your watershed and regional geometry. So the most important part of this section, the watershed section, is probably the drainage area. You can add your location and any specific notes you have about your project site. Advance. Just below that, you can enter in information about your regional channel geometry. So you have two options to do that in the spreadsheet. You can use a known regional curve or hydraulic geometry relationship if you have one. We have some preset ones within the current spreadsheet, but those are mainly focused on the tri-state region of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. So if you're within watersheds within that region in the Western Lake Erie Basin, you can use the pre-selected ones we have. Otherwise, you can, if you have a known regional curve and you've made your own measurements, you can enter that option in to the option 2. So anywhere where you see a blue cell is where you would enter information. Advance. Next on the watershed page, as you scroll down the worksheet, is your regional hydrology information. Again, we give you multiple options for putting in regional hydrology. So option 1 would be to go to StreamStats, USGS program online, streamstats.usgs.gov. If your state does not have a StreamStats website, and I'll show a slide of that in a second, you can either enter in another hydrology method in the blue cells. Maybe you're using the curve number method or you have measured discharge from your site. So that's option 2 technically. And then option 3 is if you have published USGS discharge equations. In the current version of the spreadsheet we just have Ohio in there, but we'd like to maybe expand that out to other states and other regions. But if you have your own, you can enter it into the blue cells. Advance. And so here's a screenshot of what stream stats might give you if you are not familiar with that. And it gives you discharge data for a series of recurrence intervals and watershed area for your site. Advance. You may have published measured gauge data from USGS, and you're welcome to use that as well, but your site may be a lot smaller than where this discharge data was taken. Advance. So you may have to calibrate that discharge down to the site, down to the drainage area of your site, and we do have some information, some fact sheets available on the Ohio State University Extension website that can help you do that if you're not familiar with that methodology. Advance. So then we move on to the next survey. After we've entered in our regional hydrology and regional geometry data, then we enter in our actual measured data for the ditch in question, our site. And so we enter in a, the current version of the spreadsheet is based on standard laser leveling techniques. We're working on a version now that will incorporate total station techniques to measure cross sections along a ditch. Advance. So we simply enter in a distance and elevation. Advance. And that will plot automatically as you enter the numbers in just to the right. It will automatically plot on the graph in the spreadsheet and make calculations as you're entering data in. Advance. We can make changes to the geometry of our measurements. Specifically, we can, what it will do is the spreadsheet will calculate a regression line for the bankful elevation that you measure in the field and also a ditchful elevation. The ditchful elevation is represented by the red line and the bankful elevation is represented by the blue line. And I'll show detailed shots of that in a second. Advance. So for some reason, if you make a mistake in the field or you're not able to correctly identify some features in the field, you can come back to the lab and you can adjust some of your measurements, so where that elevation of that blue line is or that where that red line is, to help put it at the exact elevation of the channel forming or bankful discharge. Advance. You can also, if your project calls for it, you can change the bed elevation of your project. So sometimes we may need to move a channel, or we may need to link up the grade of a channel between two culverts or perhaps a new culvert downstream. We have that option to investigate that in the spreadsheet. Advance. And as you enter numbers in, it automatically will redraw a new bed elevation for you on a channel profile. Advance. And then, now that we've entered in our regional data and our site-specific measured data, then we can start to look at different design options. Advance. The three options that we have available currently in the spreadsheet are the two-stage option, where we're only constructing a bench and no channel excavation. We have a channel and bench, which we kind of consider our self-forming or channel relocation option. And then we also have a flat base option, which is our self-forming two-stage option. You can select one of three of those options and then click the Show Hide Template, so you can see a template overlaid onto your existing cross-section. Advance. Advance. Okay, so this would be what your cross-section will look like after the data has been entered in and you've adjusted the red and blue lines accordingly. Advance. You can see the templates are overlaid. The red template sort of indicates the two-stage geometry. The gray template indicates the self-forming geometry. Anything within that red line is material that will be excavated. If we want to calculate what the earthwork amount will be for any given cross-section or across the entire length of our project, we simply check the button on the lower right corner, and you can see that up in the right in the middle of our graph, we have an earthwork balance cut of 63 square feet. So it'll start to calculate earthwork volumes for us. Advance. We can either select this to be our representative cross-section, or we can use the average existing cross-section over the length of our channel. Sometimes we have areas of our channel that aren't representative, and we may want to omit those from our analysis. You could also see that the graph change, we were able to move our template channel back and forth within the ditch, and so that might represent a channel relocation project. So we can move that template back and forth and up and down to adjust where our template is and how we calculate our earthwork balances. Advance. Okay, so we can enter in as many cross sections as we have for our project site, or we can use the average existing condition, which basically averages all of our cross section data together. Advance. And here's where we start to make some cost-benefit decisions about what our design might be, what our design options might be for our given site conditions. So first, if we look at our average condition, we can compare the measured existing condition to what we might expect from regional measurements to also a design condition. Advance. And then on the analysis tab, here's where we start to do some of the hydraulics engineering and some of the cost-benefit analyses that will help us to select whether our design is appropriate for our project goals. Advance. For example, if we were to select, if we were to evaluate a self-forming channel design to convert our conventional ditch to a self-forming channel design, we might show that there might be a cost of earthwork that might be 2,000, almost 3,000 cubic yards. We can compare that to a potential future storage of soil. Again, that design excavates a large over-widened cross-section where the system then is able to lower down velocities and deposit materials and self-organize into a channel and floodplain. And so our future calculated storage for a design like that might be considered a benefit to our project. So we're actually holding back, actually acting as a sediment sink for that type of project. The two-stage option may not provide us that much future storage or only minimal future storage. For this design case study that I'm showing you here, our two-stage design gives us very minimal future storage, but our self-forming design can actually store almost more than 1,400 cubic yards of soil or sediments that aren't going downstream to receiving waters. So that's kind of helping us start to make decisions about what type of design might be appropriate based on if our project goals are more water quality in nature. Advance. If our project goals are more stability or hydraulics driven in nature, we can make those assessments also in this tab. Advance. And here we can see side-by-side comparisons of a conventional channel or the existing condition on the far left, the self-forming in the middle, and the two-stage on the right. And if flooding out into the fields is a problem that we're trying to solve, we could see that by excavating an over-widened width, we can drop that flood stage of the 100-year storm event by about 1.5 feet. So it's not flooding out into the fields. We can also drop that flood stage down by about 1 foot if we do the two-stage design. We can then go below that and we can look at what our increased capacity might be by adopting one of these two designs and what our increased velocities or decreased velocities and tractive forces might be. So we can see how stable our system might be. We can also advance one more time. We can also look at this bar graph here where we're calculating shear stresses of each returns interval storm and also channel velocities. We want to be careful not to exceed permissible velocities, and so we can make evaluations and comparisons directly in the spreadsheet. Advance. And then we can advance again. And then we can make decisions about changing our design to fit our criteria better. So we can change our side slopes, we could add more floodplain or less floodplain, we could change the bed slope. We can also play around with different types of vegetation and how that changes our hydraulics and stability. Advance. So this is just one tool that we have in our toolbox. The tool that I showed you today and the detailed user manual is available at agditches.osu.edu under the Tools and Models tab. We also have other tools that can be used in conjunction with this, called an in-stream nitrogen assimilation tool and an in-stream phosphorus tool that we're working on. I always say to build a better ditch, it requires a good team. So my team, John Witter and Andy Ward, were instrumental in developing this tool. And we're looking forward to hearing your comments about it and whether you find it useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And I think Rick Cruse is just running a sound check right now. We'll see if we're able to get him on board. But in the meantime, I'd open it up to questions from our participants. So either put a question in the chat box. That's probably preferable if you have a question for any of our speakers, or at this point, if I think you may be able to raise your hand, and I can call on you, and we can get your mic on and see if we can get you to ask a question that way. So, questions in the chat box first, please. I can hear some typing. In the meantime, while those are coming in, I'll ask Laura, if you're still on, you told us that the Wisconsin's Runoff Advisory System is going to be expanded into other states. Can you tell us again what the timeline is for expansion? I think it was into Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio.
My contact for this is Dustin Goring at the National River Flood Forecast Center in Minnesota, and according to him, they'll start doing these expansions after they've finished conversion to the 4-kilometer square grid model, which he thought would be by the end of the summer. So in Wisconsin, it took a couple of years from the time we started to the time it got up, and a lot of that time was spent looking at calibrating the models so that we could evaluate what their flood forecast model results, how they compared to when field runoff was occurring. So I suspect it'll be at least a couple of years before they actually are online. And I see that Ann asked who the contact was, and I'm going to put Dustin's information just in the chat box so that there won't be any problem with getting the spelling.
Excellent, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, my understanding is that we have Rick Cruse's microphone fixed. So Rick, can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Oh, excellent. All right.
Excellent. We'll try.
I'm going to see if I can go all the way back to Iowa Daily Erosion Project. There we go. Okay. Take it away.
We'll do a flying trip. I've been fortunate to work with the dream team in terms of researchers on this project. Brian Gilder, David James, and Daryl Hersman especially have done a lot of the heavy lifting, so future reference to them they're probably ones that you'd want to talk to. Okay, so I'll thank you. Okay, the mission is to help farmers, land managers, and the public better understand what's happening relative to soil erosion and have it close to real time. If we're going to manage soil erosion, soil conservation, there's two things we need, absolutely imperative. There's other things also. One is a planning tool. What can we use to tell us if we do this, then this is likely to happen? That's for us to put our conservation practices on the landscape. We have a tool that works really well. The Universal Soil Loss Equation, its derivative actually, the revised Universal Soil Loss Equation, Russell 2, works well. Now for planning purposes, we use an average rainfall and the rainfall characteristics of a given location, so that works well for planning. If you do this, then this is likely to happen. The other tool that we really need is something that tells us what is happening, what has recently happened, because the landscape isn't always filled with these conservation planning approaches that the tool might recommend that we do. The Iowa Daily Erosion Project is that tool, or is an example of a tool to help fill that void. Could we see the next slide, please? Okay, the real tool is the WEP model. That is a model that, hang on just a second, I got control here now. Okay, now go forward. Okay, in conceptual-wise, predicting soil erosion depends on just a few items, and it sounds relatively simple. Number one, you need rainfall. You need rainfall that's greater than your infiltration capacity, so you have runoff. If the soil surface is different, you will have different runoff characteristics, which means we need to know what farmers are planting, what crops they're using, what tillage they've used. We need to know what soil type, because those things influence runoff. A variety of things that most of us know conceptually wise. Common sense is what we needed. WEP uses all of these inputs to give us our erosion and runoff estimate. Now the real issue is this. Where do we get that information? How do we get that information in a way that allows this model, WEP, to give us our calculation, to give us our estimate? In the upper left-hand corner exemplifies the rainfall that we're getting. Now vision this. This is for the state of Iowa, and we'll talk about expansion here shortly. Will have, now this is working with Vitek Krajewski from the University of Iowa, for every 1/3 mile, 1/3 mile square. Okay, 1/3 mile on one side, 1/3 mile on the other side. We're getting rainfall information every 5 minutes across the entire state. So that's a gridded rainfall pattern that falls on a soil that's sloping. Where do we get the slope? We're using LIDAR and LIDAR images. So every place where rain is falling across the state, we now have the slope. Okay, we also need soil type. Okay, so we know where the rain is falling. It's georeferenced. We georeference that location on the LIDAR, LIDAR covered surface. We georeference soils from the Sergo database. So now we have rainfall, we have the slope, we have the soil type. From various sources, we have identified every field boundary in the state. David James is a wizard at this. We've got every field boundary within the field. We know what crop is growing, or estimated crop growth, and crop rotation. So now we have a variety of those things, and those fields are all georeferenced also. If you go to the right-hand side of this slide, it depicts the residue cover that we have. Residue cover and tillage type. How on earth do we get that for every field? We get that from satellites. So now we have the inputs necessary to run WEP. If you envision those as geostacks, they're all stacked on top of these areas where we have the rainfall coming down. WEP runs those, and with that, we get, on the bottom part of this graph, we get runoff and erosion. We get crop growth and yield ultimately, and we also give a soil profile water storage. Next slide, please. I guess I've got control. You do too. In the Iowa Daily Erosion Project, the first version, we reported estimated soil erosion. This is sheet and rill erosion only for every township. Now that we're remote sense gathering all the data input, basically, we will report erosion on a HUC 12 basis. So how big is a HUC 12? The average HUC 12 in Iowa is about 21,000 acres, 22,000 acres. There are 1,616 of them in the state, and these will be reported. The erosion, runoff, well, other information also, rainfall, will be reported every 24 hours for the state of Iowa in every one of the HUC 12s. It'll be graphically reported on the internet, and we've got an example of what we'll probably be showing when this is up and running. We think the beta version will be functional mid-June, early July. What will it look like? This is an example of output that we will have for the headwaters of the Soldier River. This is in southwest Iowa. Each one of those little colored in areas is one of the HUC 12s. In this case, we have the bar at the bottom of this slide. This shows precipitation. Average precipitation in each one of these HUC 12s, color coded. Another tab, in this case the erosion, again if you notice the tab on the bottom, gives us the erosion estimate. And another little interesting item here is that little black circle with a green in it. You'll be able to move that around to different HUC 12s, and in the lower right-hand corner you get more detail for each HUC 12 that you're covering with that pointer. And the other output will be runoff, an estimated runoff, and again we'll have a color-coded bar. Now this will not only be for a given watershed, in this case the Soldier River watershed. This will cover the whole state. So what holds the future? Well, one of the things we want to use is to focus conservation efforts and resources. We have limited financial capacity, so we want to help determine, or think we can determine, where damage has occurred and focus those resources. Expansion, we will be expanding this. The expansion's already started for Kansas and states surrounding this. We've had multiple requests to move this away from Iowa only, and since we're doing remote sensing, we have all the data that's needed. Now, it takes a lot of development to make this happen. You know, I mentioned the dream team. It takes some IT and some really creative wizardry to get these different diverse databases to communicate and play nicely together, and then to feed them into something like WEP and make it run correctly. My simple mind simply couldn't do it. These other guys can. Following expansion, we want to start working on routing the runoff and sediment. Right now we're dealing only with hill slope. Once we can move the sediment through the landscape, we'll be much better off. Link these to water runoff and water quality. That's another biggie, and I talked to Seth Dabney in Oxford, Mississippi this weekend. We may have a chance to actually link this to ephemeral gullies as well. So can I say amen at that point?
Amen. So glad you were able to persist and get things to work.
Well, I'm happy. I'm really happy for the opportunity. I want to turn my talk thing off if you want me to talk.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, questions for any of our speakers? Again, go ahead and put those in the chat box. We've got about 3 minutes left in our time, and happy to take questions. Okay, we've got one from Les Everett in Minnesota. Rick, that's for you. How will you link sediment and water quality in watersheds with a substantial contribution from stream bank erosion?
Okay, it's a great point. I don't think we'll have the capacity to estimate water quality in the stream. What we will be able to do, or should be able to do, would be estimate the contribution to that stream being made from upland areas. So we at this time do not have the capacity to integrate what's happening in the stream as well as upland, but simply identify a contribution.
So an opportunity for future work.
Bingo.
Okay, and we'll take a couple more questions, but I'll just call your attention to the link that one of our evaluators, Jenna Klink, has put into the chat box. So please click there, on the link that she's put in the chat box to do a brief evaluation of the webinar. Again, it is brief, so it should just take you a few minutes to tell us how this webinar worked for you, what you liked, what you didn't. And with that, we have a new question from Mark at Iowa State. So WEP isn't measuring grass/non-grass waterway erosion or runoff. Rick?
It will not measure what would have happened in an ephemeral gully at this point in time. Having grass, if it's suitably large, and I think we're about 10 meters in terms of size, it can evaluate the conservation component associated with that. We can handle terraces, we can handle tillage, we can handle the impact of grass barriers.
Great, thank you. And Jessica, I had a quick question for you. How widely applied are these alternative ditch design, the two-stage ditch and self-forming ditch? Like how, where are you seeing these installed across the region?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've seen the majority of them being installed in Indiana, but we have seen them in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, as far away as Scandinavia. They're interested in Canada. Interest down in Mississippi. We estimate that there's somewhere between 60 and 100 of these alternative designs already built and implemented, and we estimate that that is a total of somewhere between let's say 60 to 100 miles, linear miles.
Excellent. Okay, any final questions for our speakers before we sign off? Nope. Okay. Again, please look at that link in the chat box for the evaluation. We really appreciate your participation. The webinars will be archived on our website, and Janice put that URL up, northcentralwater.org, so you can find the webinar link there, and you can share it with your colleagues as you see fit. So please do so, or come back and take a look for information that you'd like from the our 4 presenters. And thank you so much for joining. Have a good day.